A final text that TMZ says read, "We're in trouble," but the NTSB confirms something totally different in their second media briefing in less than 24 hours. Let's dive into the Greg Biffle Citation Crash, what we know, latest updates on taking off. Hi, I'm Dan Milliken. The aviation and motorsports worlds are reeling right now as 7 people are gone in a fiery instant. Everyone is wondering how this happened, and while we can't answer that question, we can give some updated facts and what we now know a day and a half later. First, the plane. It was a Cessna Citation II, also known as a Cessna 550, with the tail number November 257 Bravo Whiskey. The Citation II was originally manufactured in 1981 by the Textron Aviation Group, Cessna. The plane seats 8 people and crew members. It's a twin-engine jet with the Pratt & Whitney JT15D1 engine. The Citation 550 requires 2 pilots. There's been some confusion about this on social media. There are some Citations that are single pilot, but the 550 is a 2-pilot aircraft. Now, there are waivers a pilot can get for some aircraft for single pilot operations, but it does not look like anyone in this case had that. I'm sure the NTSB will look into all of that. On board the plane were 3 pilots, and we'll get to that in a moment. This Cessna was owned by GB Aviation, which is affiliated with Greg Biffle. Some social media rumors mentioned that the plane had not flown for a long period of time, months and months, and that's incorrect. The plane was used regularly, with a flight in November, several in October, a bunch in September, and so on. Now, let's look at the weather. The weather at the airport was marginal VFR, and for those non-pilots, flying falls into 2 sets of rules. Flying visually, where you as the pilot make all the decisions about where you want to fly, how high, and all that. Or the other set of rules is called IFR, Instrument Flight Rules. And you file a flight plan and are under the guidance of air traffic control. If you fly by VFR, you have to stay in visual conditions. And how far away from the clouds all depends on the airspace that you're currently in. IFR, you can fly through the clouds because you're under ATC control. Okay, so that's about the weather kind of rules that they have. The airport was Statesville Regional. It's an uncontrolled airport, meaning there is no tower or air traffic control at the field. All the pilots use a common radio frequency. And if you file an IFR flight plan and take off from an uncontrolled field, there's several different ways to do it. You can call ATC on the phone, telephone, cell phone, to get their permission to take off in what heading and altitude, and that's called a clearance. And you get a release time. You have to depart inside a certain window, or you have to call them back. Another way that you can do this from an uncontrolled field, a non-towered airport, if you can stay visual flight rules, VFR, to take off, then you take off, you stay visual, and then you call ATC on the radio and you get your clearance in the air. With the direction and the altitude, they also give you a distinct transponder code, also referred to as a squawk code. At Statesville Regional, when they were taking off, the weather was reported light rain, little or no winds, and a broken ceiling at 1,200 feet. Also, there was a line of weather approaching from the west-southwest, heading northeast, that the airport was right on the edge of at the time of departure. All right, let's talk about the flight. According to FlightAware, this plane was headed to Sarasota, Florida, after departing Statesville Regional. The Citation took off at 10:05 from Statesville Airport, North Carolina, runway 10. We know that there was an IFR flight plan filed for the trip at an altitude of 32,000 feet, flight level 320. Here's another piece of data that hasn't been put out there yet. According to AirNav radar, the plane took off squawking 1200 VFR. According to this, they took off VFR with the plan to get their clearance in the air. After taking off at 10:06 a.m., something apparently went wrong, and the Cessna tried to turn back to the airport. Many media outlets are reporting an engine problem, but we have not yet been able to confirm that for sure. There's also been rampant speculation that a pitot tube cover may have been left on, or that a forward baggage door opened, luggage or debris came out and was ingested by an engine. But look, we don't know at this point, so all of that is just speculation. Something happened though. Initially, the plane reached 2,000 feet and stopped the climb. At 2,000 feet, you might think they were in the clouds since the ceiling was 1,200 feet broken, but that's AGL, above the ground. The airport is at an elevation of 968 feet, and that would put the ceiling at 2,168 feet, or let's just round up to 2,200 feet. And this is where we are getting confusing data. ADSB Exchange shows during this flight that the highest that the Citation got to was 3,651 feet MSL, which would have put them in the clouds. Flight Radar 24 only has them at the highest at 2,050 feet, which would have kept them visual for the entire flight. The bottom line, conflicting data, and I'm sure the NTSB team will be figuring that one out. But it's an important question. Having something go wrong at a low altitude and in the clouds is an extremely difficult situation. If you're visual, still difficult, but it's a little different. Regardless, the pilot has decided to return to the airport, which is interesting because just a few minutes away was Charlotte International with fire and rescue and very long runways. But we weren't in the cockpit and we don't know what was facing the pilots. It could have been a fire or something mechanical. Regardless, he made the choice to turn back to Statesville. And as he made the return, the plane was pretty close into the runway in the downwind for runway 28, the opposite they took off from. So ADSB data shows a very tight bank. And this is another thing that investigators will certainly look at. To be able to bank that aggressively as they turned around to make the runway, the pilot would have probably deployed full flaps. And then on one engine with full flaps, Citation could not maintain altitude. They clipped the trees and crashed in a fiery line short of the runway. The Citation initially impacted a runway light stanchion about 1,800 feet from the end of the runway threshold at 10:15 a.m. The aircraft then smashed through trees, 2 other runway light stanchions, and the runway perimeter fence before skidding to a stop near the runway threshold facing east. A security video showed the plane engulfed in flames at that moment. At the end of the runway, the fire continued to burn, destroying most of the fuselage and the inboard portions of both wings. Emergency services were called by 10:20.
Aircraft emergency. Poor aircraft is down. Unknown subjects. Runway 28.
The flight ended just 10 minutes after taking off. The Statesville Regional Airport closed and will stay closed until the NTSB finishes their in-person investigation as well as handling all the debris. News of the crash quickly spread, and it wasn't long before social media raised the alarm about the plane's registration being affiliated with Greg Biffle, though there were debates about whether he was actually on board or not initially. It looked grim regardless. Hours later, heartbroken family friend Garrett Mitchell, also known as Cletus McFarland, posted on Facebook, "Unfortunately, I can confirm Greg Biffle, his wife, Christina, daughter Emma, and son Ryder were on that plane because they were on their way to spend the afternoon with us. We are devastated. I'm so sorry to share this." While the FAA initially reported 6 people were on board, it was later confirmed by the North Carolina State Highway Patrol that 7 people were on the plane. In a press conference, the State Patrol shared that they needed to verify all of the victims' identity with a medical examiner. But by this time, a post by the families of the victims circulated the names of the other 3 people in the flight. They were Craig Wadsworth, Dennis Dutton, and his son Jack Dutton. Craig Wadsworth was a trusted friend of Biffle and part of his team. We do not know who was sitting where, and we don't have confirmation of who was the pilot flying and who would have been the right seat pilot or second in command, SIC. What we do know is that Dennis Dutton had an ATP rating and flew for Delta Airlines and had a type rating in that Citation jet, with the exemption that he had to fly with a SIC, which is standard when you get your type rating. With a lot more experience in that type, you can get that removed. Getting that SIC required removed does not mean you can fly single pilot. Just means you don't have to have a type-rated SIC in the right-hand seat. His son Jack had his private pilot certificate and had just gotten his instrument rating. Jack was a student at Auburn University with the aviation school and was set to graduate in 2028. And Greg Biffle himself had his private pilot, his multi-engine and rotor, but not instrument. According to the evidence we have right now, there were 3 pilots on board. Some have reported that Craig Wadsworth was a pilot, but we don't know that for sure. Out of the 3 pilots on board, 1 was type rated in the citation. The other 2 were not. Unless something was done just in the preceding few days and the FAA database had not been yet updated.
We're fairly confident with at least the left seat occupant, but we need to verify that, right? We need to be accurate in what we do. We do anticipate that more information on all the pilot-rated occupants will be included in our preliminary report.
Major news outlets, starting with TMZ, reported that Craig's wife, Christina, sent a text to her mom saying, "We're in trouble," right before the crash. The NTSB, in their first media briefing, said they were unaware of any text.
There may have been a report of somebody texting out from the aircraft that they were in trouble. At this time, we're not aware of that.
But in their second media briefing, they did confirm a family member had sent a text, but different than what TMZ and other media outlets are reporting.
This morning, I can confirm that the NTSB is aware of one brief text from a passenger on board the aircraft to a family member that read, and I quote, "emergency landing." Again, that's emergency landing.
The NTSB team arrived in North Carolina the night of December 18th and began their first full day of investigation on the 19th. They have a team of 16 experts led by Dan Baker, along with investigator Andrew Swick. At the moment, they have divided their team into groups to delve into the history of the aircraft, from the instrument and flight control system to the backgrounds of the crew members' experience, training, certifications. The NTSB has located and sent the cockpit voice recorder to Washington, D.C. for examination, and the cockpit voice recorder will probably tell us a lot. To clarify on cockpit voice recorder, flight data recorder, the Citation jets and what they operate in Part 91, they are not required to have either. However, this airplane in years past had actually served in a different operation that was required to have a cockpit voice recorder, so it had one on there. And the NTSB confirmed that their lab in Washington, D.C. has received the cockpit voice recorder, and they're hoping by today, Saturday, December 20th, to have that extracted. As far as flight data recorder, the airplane did not have one. However, avionics will often record the data that they have, so they'll have some limited. And this airplane, the NTSB mentions, had a Garmin 750 multifunction display that will have some data that they'll be able to at least get some information from. Also, the NTSB strongly urges anyone who has witnessed a crash to come forward to help them learn more about what may have happened. And they also welcome any photos, videos, audios, security footage to be sent to their email. Okay. While we don't know what happened, there are some things that I'm taking away from this. I'm reminded of the Kobe Bryant crash, and an old one that impacted me greatly as a teenager, the Keith Green plane crash. He was a famous Christian singer. And you got Buddy Holly and so many other celebrities. And it's what I'm going to call the celebrity passenger syndrome. When I'm the pilot, I need to put that pilot hat on and not be anyone else. If I've got that celebrity on board, I'm not their buddy. I'm not their entourage. I'm the pilot who can and will say no when needed. It's hard for me. I want people to like me, especially a famous person who may want me to take them somewhere. My instinct is to enthusiastically say, "Yes, sir," even if all the I's are not dotted and the T's not crossed. You bet. Let's kick the tires and light the fires. And this reminds me that when I am the pilot, I am nothing else. I put friendship, fanboy, whatever, I put it all in a box that won't be opened until parked at the destination. Again, I'm not saying that happened here in this tragic situation, but it's something I'm taking to remind me to watch out for celebrity passenger syndrome and the lesson that it's okay and good to say no. I'm sure there will be other lessons coming as we learn more from the NTSB about what caused this crash. All right, that's the report. When the prelim comes out in a few weeks, we'll update the story. And prayers go out to the families and the friends left behind. It's going to be an extremely hard Christmas for them. You're in my thoughts. I want to thank our sponsors, and we got links below in the description. And if you haven't checked out our report on the Cardinal that crashed in California, this one had one of the most shocking reasons for the crash. You can check it out here. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. Thanks for watching, and remember, superior judgment trumps superior skill. Take care.